So what is the best way to leave Afghanistan without appearing to have exited without having accomplished our mission of wiping out al-Qaeda and the Taliban? Here to talk about that is Dr. Joshua Gleis, counterinsurgency expert and author of Withdrawing Under Fire, Lessons Learned from Islamist Insurgencies. So, Doctor, good to have you here.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Is it a mistake to announce in advance the date you're going to begin withdrawing troops?
I am not a believer that you have to give a specific date of when it should be withdrawn. I'm much a big believer in the idea that you need to give specific deadlines without giving specific dates. In other words, give certain red lines and give certain procedures that can be put in place, and once you reach those procedures, then you can move on to be able to withdraw.
So in your view, ideally you set certain goals that you meet, and then you can withdraw if you meet those goals, and you don't worry about an actual rigid timetable?
Exactly.
Because isn't that precisely what the Obama administration is doing? When the surge was announced in 2009, there was a promise to begin pulling the troops out this summer, July to be specific, and that's precisely what the president's doing?
No, because in that case, the president specifically said they need to withdraw. We're going to start withdrawing in July 2009. Then it seemed to be backtracking and saying, well, it's only going to be the beginning of the withdrawal. Yeah. What needs to be done, in my opinion, a little more effectively, if you look at the history of the other insurgencies, is what you do is if you give specific hard deadlines, if those deadlines aren't met, it's seen as a failure on our part. Us being the United States, saying we have to remain past that deadline, and the reason is because we haven't been able to achieve our goals. If we don't give a specific deadline for achieving those goals, then we can either pull out earlier or a little bit later in that regard.
Realistically, when you have an insurgency like we're facing in Afghanistan, yes, what goals can you set that are achievable?
I think when President Obama first mentioned it in West Point, he was a little less specific in what he was talking about. Later on, he got into a little more detail. And what he specifically said was that we need to be able to weaken and destroy al-Qaeda and be able to end their safe haven in Afghanistan. There are now 50 to 100, according to at least WikiLeaks that came out of that report, about 50 to 100 members of al-Qaeda. That ignores the at least 30,000 members of the Taliban that are still there. Now, with that said, there are other ways to go around it, meaning there are ways to negotiate with the Taliban. That does not mean that you capitulate. It just means that if you can, we're at a point right now where we are in a position of strength vis-a-vis the Taliban. They are interested in negotiating with us, and Hamid Karzai, the president of Afghanistan, has openly said that the United States is negotiating. So if we can do it from a position of strength, when we hold the cards, it's going to be much better to be able to negotiate a withdrawal on our terms than if we wait until the public increases pressure, which we're already seeing the U.S. public now increasing pressure for the U.S. To withdraw troops from Afghanistan. And that's only going to increase over the years. And if we try and get more troops out through negotiations, that's going to be, in the long term, the most effective way to do so.
What did we learn from the Soviet experience in Afghanistan?
The Soviet experience in Afghanistan talked specifically about those deadlines. They gave rigid deadlines, and they said we are going to withdraw by X, Y, and Z times. And by the way, it's not only in Afghanistan. It's not only the Soviets in Afghanistan that did it. The Israelis did it when withdrawing from southern Lebanon. They gave a specific hard date, and then they had to, it was seen as they had to cut and run when they needed to reach that date. Now, that was a perception in many people's minds, but today, with the role of the Internet and the very effective way of Islamist groups using propaganda to their advantage, they're able to convince a great portion of the population that they've defeated the West, and that's what we want to try and avoid as much as possible.
Right. I'm sure we'll be watching tomorrow night when the president makes his announcement.
Absolutely.
All right. Dr. Gleis, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The book is Withdrawing Under Fire.